This is the healer that Square Enix devs have no idea what to do with. The kit that's going through a new phase every week. Every expansion it changes drastically, and each iteration spawns both fans and critics in equal measure. Sometimes it's really fun, sometimes it's really not. But what we can always count on is that it will be utterly broken because they just can't seem to pull it quite in line with the rest of the role. I myself have loved a few previous versions and actively disliked a couple. I've been wanting to make a video discussing Astro for a little while now, but I held off until both the Savage tier released and until I got the chance to play it in the Savage fights. With both of those boxes now ticked because I've been PFing a decent amount, it is time to deep dive a wee bit. How does the Dawntrail iteration hold up? Is this one finally here to stay? Is it really overpowered? The wider point that I'd like to take a look at too are the recent changes Astro received when viewed through the lens of the overall healer role, because I think a few of them, primarily the Lightspeed buffs, carry within them much more sweeping implications for 8.0. Let's get into it. Endwalker and Dawntrail Astro at their core are not wildly different from one another. In terms of healing kit, it managed to survive largely unscathed, with 0 removals and only a few additions. This is good, because it had an engaging, rewarding, and more than anything, exceptionally fun range of tools when it came to both healing and mitigating damage. As a job, it has a high level of uniqueness thanks to its range of setup heals, those that you'll place or proc 10, 20, or sometimes even 30 seconds in advance, and their effectiveness relies upon you correctly anticipating the incoming attack. Great examples of this are Earthly Star, which needs to be set 10 seconds in advance to reach peak potency. Macrocosmos, which rewards you setting up before party-wide attacks to replenish HP bars afterwards, scaling with the amount you're able to collate under it, and Horoscope, which needs to be paired with a GCD heal to extend it and buff its usefulness. I think it's fair to say that this makes it rewarding to play right, but kinda risky. Such levels of planning aren't exactly conducive with the randomness of 7 players you've never met before of various skill levels that you might run into in Party Finder. I've always loved Astro's healing kit because it's so multifaceted and it rewards careful forethought, but what really prevented me from diving deep into the job in Endwalker was that I just did not enjoy Astrodyne as a job mechanic whatsoever. To me, it felt tacked on and antithetical to the time age fantasy that I used to love. So now in Dawntrail that they've gutted it, I've been playing it a whole lot more. This video is sponsored by Dragon Raja. Dragon Raja is one of the most popular next generation open world cyberpunk style anime MMOs, and on August 22nd, it's about to get even more exciting. I think we're all here on this video because our favorite game is a glorified dress-up simulator. So I'm happy to report that Dragon Raja has a robust and really impressive level of character customization of its own. With the brand new update comes the 16th class Dragon Rider. The new Dimensional Realm Season Mode floors to truly test your skills, and gain exclusive rewards from triumphing. New and returning players can also get the adorable Milky Barrow Motoro for free by logging in during the event duration. If you join Dragon Raja's communities, you can also have a chance to win various rewards, including a Nintendo Switch. Click the download link in the description to check it out for yourself, and once more, thank you so much for sponsoring this video. The real nucleus of the Astro changes come from the rework of the card system. I still very much do feel that this was a, well, technically solution to the issue of the job that avoided taking any real risk, and I'll explain why. Previous cards were one of, if not the deepest job mechanic in the entire game. Not only would you need to select the correct target on both odd and even windows based on your random melee or range card, and before I get the comment, which I get every single time from the uninformed, no, playing it correctly was not as simple as slapping a ranged card on a ranged DPS and a melee card on a melee DPS. If you wanted to do it right, you'd pay attention to the damage profiles of each job and correctly place those cards, sometimes to the GCD, to line up with their DPS spikes. And during 2-minute burst windows, you need to do this back to back via split-second decision making. It was hard, and those cream of the crop top 20 or so Astros last expansion will probably look especially fondly on that difficult mental game that they managed to master. With that said, such a min-maxy mechanic doesn't really belong in the Final Fantasy XIV of today. Now you still have 2 cards with the same function, but you know they're coming in advance thanks to the removal of the RNG elements, meaning that from the very start of the pull, your card targets are locked in. This is a lot easier to accomplish and makes it more doable by the average player, which really, let's be honest, is a good thing. I don't take issue with these changes at all, and the more that I've played it in Party Finder and found it very comfy and relaxing to do correctly, just like the other 3 healers would be, the more I feel that the job design team made the correct decision in how they shunted card plays linked to party damage in the way they did. The other 4 I still haven't come round on though. They're boring. In the 6 extreme and savage encounters we've had so far, I have never once felt that a single card was of incredibly important value to me, and only once or twice was there a reason to attempt to play them smartly, and that was mainly linked to buffing spread arrows via a well-timed arrow. In previous videos, I've posted alternative mitigative and curative options for the cards that I think are more interesting or fit more with the Time Mage job archetype that I wish was more pronounced. But I'm not going to retread that ground here. If you want them in more detail, you can go back and watch my Which Healers Are Strongest in Dawntrail video. I think that valid feedback doesn't really require a proposed solution, and that sometimes pushing your preferred option can actually detract from the feedback you're trying to give. So, my feedback is that I think current cards are boring. I don't need them to be reverted, but I'd love if they felt a little more connected to the core of the job's kit, rather than the Brussels sprouts that you have to morosely push around on your plate after sampling the much more delicious damage cards. What these changes served to do secondarily was to shift a higher percentage of their damage into their personal, rather than their raid DPS contribution. This, once more, makes them even better in puck situations, but thanks to their potency changes, my gosh, they're really strong right now. Categorically the strongest healer in terms of damage in literally every fight by a wide margin, which, considering the multifaceted and potent nature of their healing kit and the Lightspeed changes we'll talk about next, is kind of crazy. If we go look at the statistics, Astrologian is tracking at least 500 DPS ahead of every other healer, sometimes pushing 650 to 700. It's a wide margin by Final Fantasy XIV standards, and when you look at it versus White Mage, the other pure healer, in Black Hat the differential is close to 1,000. With any other role, this would be a disparity to the extent that it would cause complaints from dedicated players. If we look back to Abyssos, a big chunk of those unbalanced jobs had a disparity in or below that region. This isn't exactly a surprise, nor has it been the first time that Astro has been in the position of being just a little bit busted, but it helps to frame why I was so surprised about the next change. Lightspeed. So one of the key weaknesses that nipped at the buds of this behemoth of a healer was the fact that they had very limited free movement. Your Lightspeed was a 90-second cooldown, but in order to play your DPS rotation correctly in both Endwalker and Dawntrail, you needed to lean on the instant weaves it provided to not delay your raid tools on the 2-minute windows, meaning that they had to align with one another. This turned your 90-second Lightspeed into a 2-minute pseudo raid buff that had no agency in its use, and I think we can all agree it was badly designed as a result. It may as well not have existed at that point. They could have just lumped the instant casts in as a secondary effect of divination and called it a day, because nothing would have changed in practice. It needed an alteration of some kind, and Square Enix have provided one. But what they ended up releasing was not what I expected at all, honestly. The stacks are not a surprise, but what is are the reduction to a 60-second cooldown combined with no nerf to the overall duration of the buff. This means that if you factor in using one swift cast every minute, honestly, you don't even need that, but we'll leave it there for posterity's sake, your 2 dot refreshes, and your 15-second light speed, Astro can now spend over a third of its time with completely free movement. No cost bars on heals, on DPS, and free double weaves. This buff is so consequential that it might genuinely be the most strong part of the job as an entirety now. It immediately went from the worst healer in terms of movement to the best, and it isn't even close. It's the best by a country mile. Going from playing Scholar and White Mage this tier over to Astro was a bit of a shock to the system, because all the mechanics that I had carefully planned my movement and timings for on the former jobs, I could just hit Lightspeed and run around without a care in the world on the latter, because major movement mechanics often have breaks between them. This 60-second cooldown meant that it and Swiftcast enabled me to cover basically every single problem challenge without any tight movements whatsoever. And you know what? It was kind of a lot of fun because I felt like a god. Traditionally, I'd say that Astro being the healer with the best movement and the most damage and some of the most broken healing tools and crazy raid buffs and the best pure healer mitt and OGCD healing and also, by the way, the best healing tanks, and they are weak at nothing at all. Traditionally, I would call that a bad thing. And logically, it is. But man, I did have a really good time playing it these past few days, and isn't the most important metric whether it's fun or not, really. In that, it wins. I was even commenting to my chat whilst joining clear parties that I felt like a god because of how much influence I could bring to bear over how the pull was going so easily on it. So that leads me to the question that I would like to pose to you, the viewer, and hopefully you, the commenter, once you've thought about it. Are the Lightspeed changes good? Or I suppose more to the point, are they fair? In the individual bubble of Astro gameplay itself, I would argue this more than any other healer is the correct recipient to these newfound speed boots. But if we draw out the lens a little bit and look at the healers as a role, it raises an interesting topic. Now I suppose it's time to explain exactly what I mean. White Mage is the other pure healer, and they also have pretty strong movement as well when you factor in everything. Their 2-dot refreshes and Swiftcast have parity with that of Astro, and in terms of their unique tools, they have 3 Afflatus heals per minute as well as the misery generated by them, all of which are instant cast GCDs. This totals 4 for 10 seconds of movement on base recast time. It isn't all that much less, and it has the advantage of being spaced out in such a way that you can spend it incrementally rather than using it all at once. That in itself is a form of balance. Astro can move freely for longer, whereas White Mage can spend those shorter 1 GCD treks as and when needed. But there's a catch, a big one. White Mage's core fundamental curative AoE skill is Afflatus Rapture, which yes, is also their movement tool. So if White Mage uses this purely for movement, they are explicitly lowering their healing capabilities during that window, and the only real reprieve from it is to try your best to push yourself into a position to be able to double dip on value from both. But Astro gets that boon, and more of it for free, able to save all their potent cooldowns for when they're needed for their primary use, keeping the party safe. No opportunity cost whatsoever. A similar division can be seen in the barrier healers too, as has been the case for a long time. To use Sacred Soil, Indom, and Lustrate, Scholar must expend Aetherflow stacks which directly reduce their personal DPS ceiling, whereas Sage get equivalents to those very same abilities with the same limit of 3 per minute, but no opportunity cost aside from that. This quirk between the shield healers has always been very interesting to me because it feels somewhat comparable between another role in this game that is a bit of a hot topic. Dark Knight versus the other 3 tanks. The Blackest Knight has an opportunity cost. If you do not proc it successfully, you lose DPS, whereas the other 3 tanks can use their short defensives for free. Dark Knight has some unique advantages with their short cooldowns, yes, but they are the only one with a potential loss by nature. So I take us back around this weird cyclical conversation once more. Should these jobs have more limitation or less? Does it not matter at all if different jobs have wildly different opportunity costs linked to their core job responsibilities? If fun is really the only metric that matters whatsoever, what is to be done? There are discussions bubbling up around Dark Knight's myriad problems, with the Blackest Knight being one of the key points of contention. I hope this video acts to draw a nice little comparison to how this train of thought isn't unique to that job, nor that role, and on top of that I would like to collect your thoughts. I guess this video was a bit of a trip really. I started off talking about how I had a great time on Astro and it's really bloody strong, maybe a little too strong since the changes, and I ended up talking on the innate variance between jobs within a role. But that's fine, I guess. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day.